In life, most people take on two very big debts. The first one is their car or the auto vehicle, and the second one is actually their mortgage, which is their house. And what triggered me to make this video today was I was giving a training to a very large energy company just last week, and I was training them on strategic decision making and critical thinking skills. And one of the questions I asked them was, what was the most difficult decision that you have to make up until today, and what will be the most difficult decision you're going to make next year? And I wanted to teach them how to apply some of these steps. And a majority of them actually mentioned that their most difficult decision was actually to purchase a house. And I thought, going through that process myself, like 15, 16 years ago, and the mistakes I made, and I didn't have an avenue to share with everyone in the cohort, but I think that it would have been valuable for some of you who are undergoing this major decision in life, and hopefully this video will actually show you what are the criteria to consider, what are the things that you may not have thought about, and what are the application steps for you to get clarity in making that decision. The first mindset shift that I want you guys to think about is really thinking that this is your first and also your last house. Why do we normally fall into this fallacy? It's because it's usually a very, very big purchase price, a very big ticket item, multiple times of your annual salary at that point. And secondly, it's because it has a very long tenure, 30 years, sometimes we even stretch it to 35 years. So the moment you have these constraints on yourself, you try to find a middle ground. You try to find something more pragmatic, something more practical. And knowing that you have to jump through hoops to be able to afford this, you actually discount yourself in your ability to grow, your ability to make more money, and your ability to wait it out so that you can buy a better or bigger house. And that mindset shift, the beauty that I had was I have hindsight. I mean, there was a decision that I made 16 years ago with the information I had, with the earning ability I had, and now looking back, don't fall into that fallacy of thinking your first and your last house, because I got into a career with the second largest energy company in the world. And I thought that, goodness, I'm going to work and retire here, such a good pay, career progression and all that. And no sooner that I fell into this comfortable zone of working with that kind of salary, I had the opportunity to move outside from the station where I was, which is in Miri. And then everything changed, and I saw my supervisors, my former bosses that were posted to China and all that, and they had huge houses in Miri. And the biggest burden was that because they had to uproot the whole family rather than commute. And yet they thought that was their retirement home as well. I've seen many of my supervisors or my superiors actually go through that struggle of having this huge house that they need to dispose of, because they also knew that they are very unlikely to come back to that base. So first, mindset change. So to help you get clarity on how to apply a thinking process to making the decision, I pull them into two main buckets. The first one will be the numbers and the logic. And the second one, and this is very, very subjective, your emotional and well-being by either purchasing or not purchasing the house. And this is something I'll share from my perspective, but you will need to dig deep into yourself, because it's so subjective and so individualized and personalized to you to be able to gauge how you feel. So what you have in front of you is something to help you go through the numbers and the logic. It's actually a spreadsheet that I simulated for someone earning a gross salary of 10,000 ringgit in the Klang Valley, net salary somewhere around 8,000 ringgit. So this spreadsheet actually hopefully will help you determine, one, the burden of debt that you have, secondly, the opportunity cost that you would have to incur if you decide to either purchase or to rent, and third will be the potential gain that you would have if you were to purchase this property, so-called property, as an asset, or would you look at it as more of a liability? The reason why that last reason was very important is because we are surrounded by people that tell us that please buy a house because it's an asset. I disagree with that, because I think properties, especially the one that you stay in, are actually a liability. My definition of an asset is a vehicle Your vehicle can mean a property or a unit trust or whatever investment vehicles that actually generate you cash flow. That's the real meaning of an asset. But if you're buying a property to stay on your own, it's actually a liability, because you, first of all, you're not getting rent, you're not getting income, but you're paying off your mortgage plus interest to the bank. And the happiest person is actually the bank. Yeah, you may derive some joy by owning a property, but technically it's not yours until you actually settle the mortgage payment. I'm going to simulate a scenario where you're someone living in a Klang Valley and you have choices of two properties. The one on the left is actually a landed gated guarded property in Kajang, semi-detached, 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, roughly about 2,200 square feet, built up area, but it's in Kajang, okay? And assuming that you work in the center of KL or probably in the PJ area. The other choice that you have is actually roughly priced the same, 700,000 condominium in Monkiara, very convenient to everywhere else, 1,500 square feet built up. And why I put this amount of 700,000, it is roughly the amount that someone earning a gross salary of 10,000 ringgit can afford, assuming he doesn't have any other properties and he doesn't overcommit on his other loans. This is something that in the ballpark where he can afford to pay, right? So this, coming back to the spreadsheet, let's assume the purchase price is 700,000. Your initial down payment of 10% is about 70,000, but there's other miscellaneous fees or cost involved, which is like your legal fees, your stamp duty and all that. And usually within the ballpark of 5% of the purchase price. So that brings up your initial down payment plus this miscellaneous cost of about 105,000. So if you were to take a 30-year mortgage on a on a, let's say, fixed interest rate over the next 30 years, let's make one variable that is constant, which is not the case, because as you can see, with rising interest rates, a lot of bank mortgages or mortgages are actually going up in terms of installment because the interest rates are rising. But let's assume it's fixed over 30 years, okay? And then you have certain upkeeps that you have to maintain the property for. Every few years you got to repaint it. There's some major repairs that you need to do probably every 5 or 10 years. So usually it's within the ball. If you average it out over 30 years, it's about 5% of the purchase price of the property as well. So you add in that 5% yearly and a mortgage payment, okay, it's roughly about 3,760 ringgit. If you're to rent, let's just say Aston Kiara 3, the rental for fully furnished furnished apartment or condo is 2,006. So the difference in between the mortgage and the rental is actually 1,150 ringgit, okay? So let's make an assumption. 30 years from now, how much do you think that you can actually sell? And of course, we would want to say that we would buy the landed property because it will fetch a better price. In the future, it's landed as compared to a condo. So let's assume you bought that Kajang property, okay, instead of renting the Ashton Kiara 3, which is more convenient to your work, okay? If you were to sell it for 5 times multiple, your property price would be roughly about 3.5 million, okay? 3.5 million. But the interest that you have to pay over the 30 years that you own that property would have been roughly about 500,000, 503,000, okay? So your net capital gains is really 3.5 million minus off your interest payments, and it ends up at about 2.9 or roughly about 3 million, okay? Let's just say you can't sell it for 5 times. Maybe you only manage to sell it for 3 times, okay? 3 times. So your net capital gains, interest remains the same because the loan amount remains the same. It's 1.6 million, okay? Now, if we were to compare an alternative opportunity rather than you purchasing the house, okay? You rent, let's say Ashton Kiara 3, you pay 2,006 in rental, and then the difference that you gain from not paying a mortgage plus 5% is that 1,150 ringgit. You go and invest it into an alternative investment vehicle, okay? So I actually simulated it, and I said, hey, if you invested in an alternative asset that gives you an 8% return annually, okay? 8% is something probably a very good unit trust, or probably shares, or probably some other investment vehicles that can give you that 8%. After 30 years, your alternative asset value, compounding at 8% per year, will be amounting to about 3 million. So let's remember the amount that we said, that if you sell at a multiple of 5 times, that means you bought a property for 700,000, you sold it for 5 times its purchase price, your original purchase price is 3.5 million, right? Only then will you be able to have net capital gains similar to that of your other investment vehicle that gives you 8%. I want you to think about it. That is assuming 5 times the price. That is assuming interest rate does not change. Obviously, the counter argument would be, hey, your rental can also go up. Yes, but do you think that, you know, in terms of the size of the mortgage versus the rental quantum, I would think that the risk of the rental can be easily alleviated by you moving. But then if you are tied to a bank and you have that amount of loan to pay, and let's just say the interest rate rise, you can't like just, oh, I want to sell out my house because the interest rates are rising, right? But for rental property, you just said, oh, my landlord wants to increase rent, I can just move, you know, move to even somewhere better or more convenient or better, and remains the same, you see. So in a property, once you purchase, for you to get out, your exit is not as liquid or not as easy as the rent, yeah, to counter that rising interest, rising rate, rental rate kind of debate. So as you can see, opportunity cost is really very determinant on how much you can actually sell your property. If it's like 5 times, then lucky you are on par with alternative asset that gives you 8% compound return. However, if you do well in your career, you add on more money, or you get better at investing, and you bring it up, that asset return to 12%, right? Look at the difference. And if you're going to bring it up all the way to 15, obviously it's not easy, because some of the best fund managers in the world cannot sustainably deliver 15%, unless you're like someone like Warren Buffett. But at 15%, you're talking about 16 million against a net capital gain of your property, selling at 5 times, 5 times your original purchase price of 3 million. So let's assume it's a blue sky for the property as well, because we say it's blue sky for alternative investments, right? Let's say blue sky for the property as well. You manage to sell it for 10 times, okay? 10 times your purchase price, which is 7 million. Even then, it's a difference of 6.5 million to 16 million, okay? Blue sky. So this is still probably almost 3 times that of your multiple property capital gains. Something for you to consider. So this is just the numbers and the logic, okay? We haven't moved into the emotional and well-being part. Having done all the calculations, let's move into the emotional and well-being considerations. Now, this is very hard to put a cap on the value because it's subjective and based on the tolerance level of different individuals. But I, for one, first thing, I don't like commuting. I don't like to waste time in traffic. I mean, in the Klang Valley, most of my peers or my friends who have gone back to work, gone back to the office, they are complaining that the jam is even worse than prior to COVID. I don't know about you. If you have a differing opinion, please share in the comments. We'd love to hear. I mean, I work flexible hours. My studio is like close by to where I stay, and I try not to get into the central business district as much as I can during rush hour. So I wouldn't be a good gauge to know whether traffic has worsened or not. But let me know your thoughts, right, in the comments. The second consideration is really, you remember that scenario where I said that if your landlord just decided to increase your rent substantially and you decided, oh no, I can't take this, I'm going to move, whether it takes a toll on you and whether it's stressful for moving. I know some peers, very rare, they're fine with moving. They're fine to explore new places. They're fine to explore new territory, and they're fine to move, right? But I, for one, with a family, after moving 5 times in my entire career and life, I'm a little bit tired of moving, uprooting the family, packing, unpacking, and all that. So that's something that you have to consider as well if you were to rent and you come into a scenario where your landlord just increases the rent indiscriminately, okay? Second consideration. The third consideration is this: because you're renting, you cannot renovate, you cannot decorate the house at your whims and fancy. You are at the mercy of the landlord to determine that. And if that is something that you prize very heavily on, I think that you may be willing to sacrifice a little bit of the gains that you're going to get into alternative investments, because you want that kind of creative space. And it's something underrated, because like one of the reasons why, ironically, one of the reasons why I bought my first property, which I used to stay, and I used to have that old naive mindset that properties are actually assets, and I learned I paid a very heavy price for that, was because I wanted my own living room. I was staying in a rented house. It was a landed property, 3 other colleagues, awesome housemates, but I wanted to have my own living room space where I could put my TV, hi-fi system and all that. And I went into this rash decision of actually buying a huge house, because I thought that I would retire in the company that I used to work for. And looking back in hindsight, there was a mistake, even though it was like subjective reason number 3. I wanted my own creative space. But then looking back, it's more pragmatic that, you combine both the emotional well-being side of things as well as the practicality of the logic and number. So hopefully these 2 big buckets help you apply your decision making into that big debt that you're going to take on. Don't get too carried away with either one, because I know some people can be on extreme ends of both. The guy who is the numbers guy will go extreme end on the logic and numbers. The guy who is like so much into the emotional, feeling connected with himself or herself, go all the way to the subjective and ignoring the logic and numbers together. I think it really boils down to what makes you comfortable and happy. I, on the other hand, I've had the benefit of hindsight, made those mistakes, but I hope that you wouldn't repeat some of the mistakes that I made, and that's why I'm sharing this in this video today. Hope it has brought value to you. Subscribe to my channel, give it a like, hit that notification bell if you need to know when the next videos are out, and don't fall into the fallacy of believing whatever society tells you is true. Test that assumption. Be open-minded to change a little bit of mindset, because if it's backed by facts and figures, it sounds reasonable, it sounds common sense. Those are advice that you should not ignore. See you guys in the next video.